Good evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources. I'm Stu Reid, and I'm here with a special guest today. In addition to my co-host, Dave Burstein, welcome, Dave. We have my co-executive producer of the program and business partner in crime as well, Mr. Douglas Frazier from Digital Divide Partners. And I'm going to turn the show over to Dave, who's actually going to conduct the show today. And I think, Dave, you're going to talk to me and Doug about some of our work, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Well, more than 20 years ago, I saw a little news article about some folks in the South Bronx who were doing stuff on the internet that was, among other things, among the most advanced in the United States at the time. While Verizon was doing DSL plain stuff at speeds of about 3 megabits, they were doing VDSL at speeds 10 times faster and distributing it at a very low price across the South Bronx to apartment buildings. Did you do public housing back then, or was it all private?
I think we were doing both. Well, the VDSL was private, but we're also doing stuff with public housing as well, kind of overlapping.
And they were bringing
hybrid.
Cable, yeah, they were bringing cable TV to one of the poorest networks in the United States that the cable companies and Verizon and everybody doing broadband were basically ignoring at that time. To do it, Doug, did you dig up any streets to get the fiber out to the homes?
Only on city property, because we had a franchise. So yeah, we did. We actually had a franchise when we did the fiber part of it, because we ran fiber to 42. Those are 42 separate buildings where we ran fiber to those. So yeah, we had to dig up some of the street, but not much.
And
we
that's
were also,
really, go ahead.
I was going to say, we were also, by the way, licensed by Con Edison to use their ducts. So we spent a lot of time over in their little laboratory in Long Island City, learning how not to electrocute yourself when you're in their ducts. It's pretty interesting.
Now, Ivan Seidenberg at Verizon did start out as a lineman, but there are very few executives in those companies that got out there digging out the streets. Did that make it more, is that one of the reasons you were able to go into neighborhoods that the big companies said were uneconomic?
Well, I mean, we were embedded, if you don't mind me saying, we were embedded in the cable company in Newark because we had landed a deal with some Harvard MBAs who had a venture capital firm, and they embedded us in one of their investments in the city of Newark, which was the cable company. And we actually learned how a cable company worked. So that, I think that kind of helped. What do you think, Stu?
Oh, without a doubt. We were there every single day, 6 days a week, learning all the ins and outs of how a cable system operated, from inside the actual business. And we ran an installation business where we wired buildings, wired the biggest apartment building in the state of Newark, Ivy
New
Hill.
Jersey.
New Jersey. State of New Jersey, right? Outside of Newark.
You made Newark a state.
And we had about 25 trucks or contractors working for us who were going in people's homes every day putting in cable. So, we learned all about customer relations and
yeah, it was pretty interesting.
And actual ins and outs, climbing the pole and making the connections and all the nuts and bolts, as well as the operational stuff. So that was an invaluable experience.
And plus, we learned what kind of equipment people had in their house. I thought that was the most enlightening thing. We saw what people were actually using, the different types of setups, and all these many different homes. It's quite an eye opener.
There were a lot of people back then, in fact, there are a lot of people now, who think poor people don't understand what the internet is about and don't want it. I remember being amazed when I discovered that internet take rates were often higher in poor neighborhoods because they had more kids. What did families think of the internet back then, 25 years ago, before it was ubiquitous?
Well, I mean,
go ahead, Doug.
if you want me to, okay.
Well, I was going to start for a moment, just kind of back up a little bit, because Doug and I started out in the cable TV business. And back then, folks, the industry folks were saying that Black and brown and low income folks weren't big adopters of cable TV. And what we learned was that our folks were huge adopters of cable TV, and in fact, big and early adopters of technology in general. You know, we observed that, you know, a lot of our families couldn't afford to go take all the kids to the movies or all the kids to any particular event, but they could afford, you know, that one monthly fee for cable. And it was a big bang for the buck for a lot of families. And that was an eye opener for us. I don't think the industry picked up on that for a long time, but we did. And I think it kind of carried forward. I know it carried forward in terms of the mobile devices and how quickly folks in our communities adopted smartphones and cell phones and mobile devices. So you know, we weren't surprised at that at all, because we had seen it. We're talking about when Doug and I started off. We're talking about back in the '80s when we were doing cable TV, when cable TV was relatively.
So we saw these kids' parents.
What's that?
We saw these kids. We saw the kids today. We were in their parents. Saw their parents adopting technology.
That's
and
right.
Subsequently, we've been around to see even them adopt technology. So it was a pretty interesting learning lesson today for anyone who to have that kind of breadth of experience along with the technology part, which was pretty interesting.
Now, let's come to today. What are you out there doing? You still out there in public housing and in the community?
Yes, what we, thanks to you, by the way, we got involved with the Internet Foundation and the New York Internet chapter. And, you know, where internet is for everybody. And, you know, we had to kind of like put our money where our mouth was in that. And we started looking around, and what Stu didn't say was that when we were in the cable business, that was the entertainment business. You know, people were talking about buying access to entertainment from us. When the internet showed up, we realized that the cable at that time didn't have the capacity. And since we really knew a lot about the system, the way they were trying to use how they were going to bring internet, we didn't have a lot of confidence in that. They were so far behind. They were so not aggressive in what needed to be done. So we kind of like switched over into the VDSL and broadband part of things, because then we started learning that the internet was when you're doing internet, you're in the problem solving. You're helping people to learn. You're helping people to be smarter. So we kind of moved ourselves to thinking of ways to help people. And so we were, again, embedded up at City College. There you go, being embedded somewhere. And as part of our service to the community, we were called out and sat at a few meetings at the Housing Authority and started listening to people's problems. And, you know, we said, hey, this could work, that could work. And then we started doing it. And which kind of led us to where we are today, where we started our own not-for-profit. We started a not-for-profit internet service. We kind of tested it out to see how we could make that happen and how would you do that and what kind of way would it work. And so we partnered up with the residents who were also 501Cs. And we started looking at ways to copy off of the way that the country electrified itself. Because what Stu also didn't say, we spent quite a bit of time upstate in the Catskills at a rural phone company. So we spent some time with I think that was a Delphi. No, it wasn't a Delphi.
Warwick.
I can't think of the name of it. Right?
Warwick.
But we spent some time with Warwick. Yeah, Warwick. Yeah, so up in Warwick, New York. So we spent a lot of time with the city, and then we spent a little time with a rural company to see the kind of things they were going, because they were also using VDSL. So we learned both kind of like all sides of the pie. And we realized that by working with the residents of the housing authority, that we could, take our knowledge and start doing some free services. And that's what we started doing. We started looking at ways to problem solve. And the first thing we did was put in the wireless technical campus. So, and that kind of led to everything from there. Wouldn't you say, Stu?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And what
So
percentage?
right now
Go ahead.
I was going to say, right now we're running a free service through a free ISP that's run by only not-for-profits and the residents themselves.
Yeah, just your analogy, though, you started to talk about the rural, the electrical cooperatives, how electricity kind of propagated itself, if you will, through this country.
Okay.
A lot of it was through local cooperatives that work together to bring electricity. And that's kind of the model that we've adopted with our nonprofit partners.
People thought of these rural areas that didn't have electricity as a little Abner territory, and called them called people hicks, and looked down on them if they managed to move to the city. Were you surprised to discover the skills that were out there in the community when you went upstate New York?
No. We weren't surprised of the skills in upstate New York. We weren't surprised of the things that we saw in Newark. We weren't surprised at the things we've seen in the housing projects. No, you're not surprised, because remember, we spent a lot of time going into people's homes. And I think we've probably been in more people's homes than any normal person ever would. Wouldn't you say, Stu?
Yeah, without a doubt.
You just don't do that.
Yeah, one of the things that predated even our work in Newark, just as kind of a learning lesson for myself and Doug, is we were actually installers working for the one-channel service that was in the outer boroughs of New York before there was any cable anywhere except for Manhattan. We were actually grunt installers, going to people's homes in the Bronx, in Harlem, and in Brooklyn, and we learned so much just about dealing with people. About one of the things that hit us, and I'm sure Doug will echo this, was just how generous poor people are. I mean, we knew that we both grew up poor. I grew up in the projects. Doug grew up in the projects. So it wasn't really surprising, but, folks would like invite us in. We're coming there to install their cable, and not even their cable, install their one channel of HBO, and they would be offering to cook us breakfast. You guys want breakfast? You guys want coffee? Can I get you anything? And it was stunning. Contrast it with, we go to Riverdale.
You gotta help the people, man.
We'll go to Riverdale, and we couldn't get the time of day. No tips, no nothing. more just kind of like dirty looks. So, that taught us something, because again, back then, this is in the 80s, folks were saying, well, poor folks couldn't afford cable. They didn't want cable. And we learned that was just not true at all.
And
so we took that.
When you hear people like the folks doing the internet plan for New York City today, how many of them have that perspective about the skills and the interest and the nature of the people they're trying to reach? Are they community people planning New York? are they people who may not be from the community, but take the time to go out and learn it, learn what the community is? Or are they pie in the sky looking at an abstract level? What are you finding on the people who are making these plans?
Doug?
Well, great question, Dave. I would start at the inartful name called the master plan. I think on the street they call it the master.
They call it what, Doug? Say it
So
again?
I've just massa.
The master
Yeah.
plan, huh?
Master plan. Yes, sir, massa. I mean, so that would answer your question, Dave. I don't think they took any input from anyone. Because if you, when you look at some of the things that they are talking about and how they operate, I'm just going to go by this. John Liu, city controller, came up to the radio station and we interviewed him, and we still have that interview on YouTube. And I went and looked at it like 9 years ago. And he came in and he broke down how much money is being spent by who and who gets it. And once you hear that interview, it's 22 minutes long. Once you hear the city controller lay out who's getting the money and how the money is divided, you'll understand who's making all the decisions, and you'll get a pretty good idea of why. And the answer to the why is they're probably doing it because they can. And the numbers are, they were mind blowing. I would challenge anybody to, go and type up MWBE John Liu on the Google machine on YouTube, and you listen to him. He'll tell you who's in charge and who they don't think about. And I think it sounds much better coming from him than, and I don't know, and I'll say this, I have no idea why they do what they do, other than maybe they're doing it because they can. Stu, you can add something to that.
Let's look at some of the things out there. The phone company here in New York, they committed in 2008 to wire or put fiber to everybody in the city of New York by 2012 and 2014. How much of the city is wired or connected with fiber today, 2021?
Well, I mean, and I apologize, Dave, because I'm going to answer only part of your question. When you ask me that, what I immediately think of is, again, the experience that we've had in the city and what they do. And we know for a fact that the city $500 million every year to provide telecom services. So in that perspective, I'm also, because we built systems and networks of systems and apartment buildings and all that, you start thinking about, wow, they're putting fiber in all these locations while at the same time the city is giving them $500 million every 12 months. So you would think they would be able to do anywhere that they wanted, anytime that they felt like it. And I think that's how they look at things. If somebody complains about something, they have enough resources just to go do it. And that's what they do. And so, no, they don't have to keep their word, in my opinion, because of their no bid contract. So I don't think they're concerned about anything that anybody's saying. In fact, we were told by the people who supervise them that those guys come in there and yell at them. True story. Am I right, Stu? Am I making it?
No, you're not. That's true. But Dave, and answer your question, I don't have the exact number, but I would estimate that no more than half of the city has direct fiber from Verizon. I know it's nowhere near 100%. The city has yelled and screamed at them, but they don't hear that. They don't really have to listen. The city has virtually no leverage from what we see. The big corporations.
They do have leverage. They got
what? They got that $500 million.
I was gonna say they give them $500 million. They give them $500 million a year. What do you mean they got no leverage? What are you talking about?
Well, they don't.
I think that's leverage.
They don't exercise the leverage. How about that?
And among other things, they happen to be the government And
Agreed.
people like Verizon need to get franchises. And that franchise here in New York City said they'd have to hook up everybody. And I'm in a middle class apartment building. I can't get Verizon fiber. Nobody in my block can.
Yeah. And Dave, 4 blocks from your house, in the housing projects, 4 blocks from your house, they put it in there because that's what they thought the heat is. So that's how they do. Wherever they think the heat is, they go and put it in there and shut everybody up because they have the resources to do so. And the city yells at them on one side of the page, and then on the other side of the page, they're cutting them checks. Check that out. So when we saw that part of it, we understood the absurdity of the theater.
Now, again, let's go to today. There's a lot of federal programs that are trying to connect everybody. I was on a Columbia University webinar with Donald Trump's first appointment to head the NTIA, in charge of the internet for the United States. And he was telling me that people, even conservative Republicans like him, were realizing that, yes, we've got a pandemic out there and we need to get everybody connected. What's the quality of the work they're doing? Are they doing the right thing with their programs?
It's a pretty good question. It's a pretty good
Washington
question.
thinks they need to connect everybody. Do they understand how to do that?
Well, we do. We know how to do it. We know exactly how to do it. But if you're asking about them, I guess you got to answer that. I know we know how to do it.
Well, one side of the equation that I have a big issue with, in particular, as the Biden administration is talking about broadband now and broadband infrastructure, with this big emphasis on rural communities, they are looking at places where there is no quote unquote infrastructure, where it's not available, as opposed to making service that folks can actually use in areas where it's available, but it's not accessed. For instance, New York City housing right here in New York City, some 600,000 folks, half the population does not have internet at home. Yet if you try to get some money from the federal government to build infrastructure to provide service made perhaps at no cost, like what we're doing to the residents, the feds will tell you, well, there's already service there. We're not going to spend any money because they already have quote unquote access. Never mind that it's just 2 duopoly providers with extremely high pricing.
So, Stu,
yes.
Why wouldn't people just go straight to it? They're protecting the private companies by dint of their policies. I mean, it's not, forget about all the other stuff. I mean, that's what it really is.
Yeah, well,
and you got to ask yourself, is that what we want the government to be doing? I mean, forget about all of you explaining, they'll just explain back, oh, well, that's because of this, that's because of that. It doesn't matter that all the things that you said are right. What's really will get people to focus, I believe, is realizing that they're trying to protect the private, and they should provide the service for everybody. Everybody should have some modicum of free service, everyone. And the people that charge for the service, they should continue to charge. People will, there's some people who walk, there's some people who take the bus, there's some people who take Uber. People know how to decide what they want to do, and walking is free. So some things I believe that will work, which instead of them trying to be protectionists and, have all this explaining, they should just, allow people to try to hook everybody up so everybody can have some modicum of free service. That's what I did. Then you get past all that people trying to explain what they're doing, but they'll just counter everything you said with some fake explanation that no one cares about. That's how they are. So if you call them out for protecting private companies with the people's money, and they don't want to do the people's will with the people's money so they can protect their private enterprise, I think that's more to the core for me, not for you, just for me. I think that's more of a way to resolve it than what they're doing now. Absolutely, it's kind of nonsensical. I think it's not going to. You need to have something that kind of helps everybody. So everybody
And
gets a
after
little
the
something.
break,
I think.
I'm going to ask you guys, based on your experience, what it takes to build that network, what kind of experience, and so on. Because that's something else that
Okay.
none of the policy people have any idea about. And I've been talking to some pretty high-level policy people on this lately. But Stu, could you give a really great internet connection, the kind you expect to get from fiber or cable to people in the community at a lower price than the commercial outfits do? It's now $60, $70 a month to go to the phone company or the cable company and get a basic connection. Could you beat that?
I would say we could, and we are. I mean, we've been providing service to many residents in public housing for over 5 years now. And for the most part, I say for the whole part, at no direct charge to the end user. So the answer to your question is absolutely yes. Could and are currently.
And when I talk to somebody like Chris Lewis or listen to somebody like Gigi Sohn, who are strong proponents of what's coming out of Washington, where they're talking about billions of dollars of infrastructure, they're setting their plan based on people like you being able to do it. And that's why, after we take a break, I want to get you talking as people who've actually gone out and built it about what it takes, because that's something that you learned and people can learn from your experience. But why don't you introduce a break for us, Stu?
Okay, well, thank you, Dave. This is Community and Technology with Stu Reid, Dave Burstein, and our special guest and actual executive co-producer of the show, Doug Frazier. We're on 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back. Okay, we're back. Community and Technology with Stu Reid, Dave Burstein, and our special guest appearance by our co-executive producer, Mr. Doug Frazier. This is 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. And I'm going to turn the mic back over to Dave Burstein, who's actually hosting the show for today. Dave.
The reason I'm taking this away from Stu for this show is because we're talking about the work Stu and his partner Doug Frazier have been doing since before I met him 20-some years ago. I went up to the South Bronx because I heard there was a remarkable network being built. They were using VDSL, which was about 10 times as fast as the ADSL that Verizon was putting in at the time. That was something that wasn't happening many places. In fact, the main place where it was known to be happening was in Phoenix, Arizona, where US West was doing trials with the same VDSL technology, and everybody, like me, a New York reporter covering broadband, were following closely. So this was the most advanced DSL from any phone company in the world. And I discovered that some guys I had never heard of were doing it out in the community. There's now a lot of federal money being talked about, to some of which is designed to go to community broadband. So I want to get your perspective on what it would take to develop operations to do community broadband. How long did it take you guys to where you could actually build a network and do everything it took? You were working for cable company in Newark and so on. What did it take to learn the trade well enough to build your own network? Stu, how long did you spend?
That's your question, Doug.
He asked you, Stu. He asked you, Stu.
You know, I can't pretend to say that I actually learned a day because I'm so much on the administrative management end. The real techno genius of our collaboration is Mr. Doug, who's on the line with us. So you know, I think, you know, if you want to know how he learned and all of that stuff, he's the one to tell you.
Okay, what did it take for you to learn enough to go to the South Bronx and start putting a network in? Because I don't think putting a network in is that easy.
Well, you know, here's the funny thing. I'm glad you said that, Dave, because the funny thing was, it isn't that easy. It wasn't that easy, but we didn't kind of know it. I mean, specifically. And I remember the first day that we showed up when we were going to decide, this is the first day we're going to start working. And we spoke with the people at the office and said, okay, you got to go around there and talk to the guy that runs the landscaping guy. It was an older gentleman who had been there for 30 or 40 years. And we told him what we was doing. He said, what? I'm not going to be putting cable. He said, any cowboy pictures on there? We said, oh yeah, we got a whole channel for cowboys whenever we get to work. He said, okay. He said, okay, well, you know, don't mess up this, don't mess up that, blah, 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 blah. And I remember we walked outside, we said, oh boy. And then I remember going back in and asking, did he have a shovel? We showed up with nothing. We showed up with literally 2 shovels and a toothpick. We had nothing. And he said,
I don't think we had the 2 shovels. We didn't have the 2 shovels.
I think we just had the toothpick. We had the 2 toothpicks. And the guy opened the door to all of his stuff, Dave, and let us use his tools. So there you go. So that's how difficult it was in the beginning. But one of the things about not knowing something is that you don't know how hard it is. And so you're not despondent by your lack of knowledge. How about that for an answer?
We talked about in the first half of the show how you'd already been working in cable. How many years had you been in the field before you started doing your own thing?
Oh, not very long. Oh, well, you know, that's funny, Dave, because even in Newark, we were embedded there through a venture capital deal that we just kind of lucked our way into. And along the way, while we were there embedded and studying, the contractor lost his contract, and all those guys was out of work, and it fell in our hands. And it took us about maybe 3 or 4 weeks before we got everything running up where we could handle all the work every day. I remember riding home in the car with Stu and saying, gee, I wonder how we knew this. And then it dawned on me that I worked in the phone company when I was 17 years old down in Wall Street in their special private telephone division, only because they were building the World Trade Center and they plucked a few of us out of the school. So that's kind of like where I really learned it. I was a teenager, so I kind of forgot it. And when we got over in Newark, you know, all the stuff kind of started coming back, that I knew the basics of craftsmanship. But they train you, you know, they spent a lot of time training you at that time when you were in the phone. We spent like 8 or 9 months just training every day. Training 5 days a week over in the building with no windows on 57s. You know, and they had a lot of secret places you could go on. At this time, there was only one phone company in the whole country. So I learned it from there, Dave, to answer you.
And how long did it take before you got pretty good at doing those installs? Because I remember when they first started out in Phoenix, it took a while before their folks could get a lot done and work efficiently. What was it like the first?
Well, remember, by the time we had gotten to do VDSL, we had already had a citywide franchise. We had already been did cable work for Comcast, Time Warner, and Newark, and Cablevision at the time. We were working at all those locations simultaneously. So by that time, we had become pretty good at not only building the stuff, but engineering and all this other stuff that came with it, because we had actually had an opportunity to learn how everything worked. Was a very student didn't say that, but we learned about everything. We knew everything about how cable worked. We knew how to do it in our sleep. So the broadband was even easier to deploy than the cable, because remember, cable was analog. So, you had to balance all the channels together, limited frequencies. And, the broadband and streaming, we learned that from the VDSL, because that was a whole nother kind of structure from technology structure from cable. And so we learned about that. And while we were doing the VDSL, we were taking a wireless link for our internet uplink from this company called TowerStream. So we learned at the same time that wireless could work pretty good at long distances. So we knew where to go next. So that's what kind of helped us. So we had a variety of experience and a variety of people coming in, showing up and helping us at critical points. Would that be a fair statement, Stu?
Oh, without a doubt. And, the opportunities changed and we'd have to pivot. And we also got lucky and found some other wireless guys that a national company that was working to help bridge the digital divide, a company called One Economy, which was pretty big back in, I guess, the early 2000s. And
Obama.
Yeah, and we started doing wireless stuff with them. I guess kind of as we segued from the VDSL into wireless, and Doug mentioned that we're able to get a contract with the New York State under Governor David Patterson. We got a contract to do universal broadband, doing a hybrid wireless fiber network. I think it was 2009 when we got the contract, and we were bringing wireless and fiber service to public and affordable housing in the Bronx, Harlem, and Brooklyn.
That was pretty good.
So that we were kind of using all those technologies at that time. And One Economy is one of our partners, and they kind of helped, I guess, guide us to some degree with some of what was going on in the whole wireless space. And we just kind of went from there.
Right.
Now,
yeah, we picked it up pretty quick because we already had the base foundation.
Right.
So what you demonstrated is that there are folks in the community, like you guys in some communities, who can do it.
Correct.
But it took years before you had that kind of ability and skill. What would it take?
That's true.
What would it take if you wanted somebody, let's say a smart lawyer or a smart politician who cares about the community, but hasn't done any networks, if that person went out and tried to start building a network? What do you think would be like the first year? Do you think after the second year they'd be ready to do it well? Or do you think you really need even more experience than a year or two? We're talking about good, capable people who don't know networks, who haven't built one before.
Well, I mean, I would say that, depending upon how fearful they are about learning, you could actually teach yourself anything because they got books and all kinds of stuff, everything. So it's not impossible for somebody to do it and do it well. I would agree with that. But, I think that the real key is if you get with people who know how to do it, because it's really easy to teach somebody to do something when you really know how to do it. If you are a person that has the kind of facility and personality for teaching. And we found that there are a lot of those people among us.
I would also add to that, Dave, that, the breadth of experience that we've had, 20, 30 years kind of helps inform, how we're able to teach, how we're able to impart these skills to folks in terms of, problem solving and, and meeting obstacles.
Right.
You can teach someone to, you know, put in a wireless access point or radio, but then how do you problem solve? You know, you have this issue and that issue. You got to fall back on your experience. So I think the experience is really invaluable. So to answer your question, I would advise that politician, that lawyer, to come find somebody like me and Doug to work with who has the experience and to take advantage of that.
Show them how to do it. Yeah,
What's that?
that would work.
Yeah.
You're right, that would work because, you know, we've taught, there's people who have showed up to help and, you know, you learn how you get people, because there's a way to get people to help you where you only have to teach them one thing and they could be very, very valuable to you. So that's how you kind of like look at it. You get somebody with an expert, and with, you know, the expert, you know, only has to show the person one or two simple things so to see if they want to start getting it. And then once you do that, then once you see if the person's interested in it, then you'll be able, they'll ask you questions, you'll just be able to answer. But what we try to impose upon people is that the internet and radio are global phenomena. And if you learn how to do it, it's going to be everywhere. So you could do it anywhere that you are. So you should think about those kinds of skills that are transferable, like radio and internet is.
Stu, let me take you further into what you said. You said people have to understand how to troubleshoot and deal with problems. Let's make that concrete. If Chris Lewis was asking, what does he need to know? What kinds of things would happen out in the field? Can you give him a few examples of things that you encountered that somebody building a network might have to deal with?
You know, I would say the first thing is human relations. I would start with, you know, who are you servicing, and where are you bringing the service, and how are you involving that community in what you're doing? Because if they're not involved, if they're not a part of the solution, you know, it's not going to work. You're just imposing something from the outside that at the end of the day is not going to be effective. So I think the first thing you got to do is engage folks on the ground in whatever it is that you're doing, and bring them into right from the ground floor and make them stakeholders in what you're doing. If you got that going on, then you got a way you can start team building, and you got a way to solve problems as they come along.
Now, if I went out there and forget the color of my skin, just somebody with skills like me went out there and tried to start doing this, do you think we'd do a good job at that kind of relations? Do you think I would be good at it?
Well, you know, I think you certainly
on
know the technology.
Let me answer that question.
Let Doug answer that, because I talked about the human relations piece. So, you know, let Doug respond.
I'm terrible at that kind of thing. I
would do if he was on a team. Oh, sorry, Dave. Want me to answer?
No.
I would say Dave would do great as long as he's on a team where, you know, he could be who he is, because you need, the only way this kinds of stuff we found work is you got to have a team of people who are not alike. Mm-hmm. The more unalike they are, the better the team is. And we found, so you would be, I think would be perfect, because you're the way that you think, the way that you look things, and you're right, the color of your skin wouldn't hurt because people need to know. So we look at things and go, who can help the team? And no matter who it is, if they're interested in helping, then you kind of get somewhere. So yeah, Dave, you would be fine, man. I think you would do fine.
And I might be fine as part of the team.
And the part about you is,
but I can tell you from my experience, I learned I'm not very good at building that kind of thing. I'm not very good as a manager because my mind wanders. I'm not disciplined. I'm very not disciplined. And in particular, I'm impatient. I've worked with a lot of very smart and skilled people, and I'm not very good at working with people who are different than me. Now, I've learned a fair amount about how to do it over the years, but I still don't do it very well. And it would take a long time for me to learn how to work with the kind of team and the kind of people that are out there doing this work every day. And I say that from experience over the years. Very good with some people, but not necessarily good at the day-to-day people, building a company. And I've learned that the hard way a couple of times in my life. So I got to admit that. And that's going to be true of a whole lot of people. And I'm thinking of some very smart people I know in Washington who are sure it's going to be easy to go out there into the community. And I see you shaking your head, Doug, when I talked about
You're
it
right.
being easy to go to the community.
Well, it's not going to be easy. Of course not. Nothing's never, if it's easy, then everybody will be doing it. So it's not going to literally be easy. And I would disagree. I think you would be really good because one thing about you, you're honest, even if you don't think somebody doesn't like it, you're honest. And one of the things that you got to have a team, you got to have honest people because sometimes people will bullshit themselves, and you got to have people in there that does that. And remember, we also provide content. So, you're right there. So, I mean, we don't just go in and think, we're just going to charge somebody for some dopey ass internet. That would be, we couldn't survive that way because we would be emulating the people who really charge for things like Verizon and Spectrum and all those guys. And so we wouldn't do that. But if you're got people like you who care, who are innovative, who got their own perspective, that kind of stuff. I would say that in our kind of group, that's embraced.
Well, let me tell you
we've
why
known you for 25 years. We've known you for 25 years, Dave. I mean, there's a reason for that. We like you.
And I've learned from you guys for 25 years, which is why.
We learned from you.
Yeah, and that's good.
We learn from you. Yes. You'll be fine, man. You're good. You're all right. You're good at what you do. You're fine, man. I wouldn't have no qualms. I would have no qualms about anything when it comes to you. Stu mentioned this. I have no qualms.
Well, let me tell you why I'm asking all these questions, because I got you two who are experienced actually getting out there and doing things. I couldn't believe the ignorance. Well, let me not say ignorance. The lack of knowledge of what it takes to do this that I hear time and again from people who are very smart, decent people who really care. I want to put a name on this. Fellow who's not ignorant, but he didn't appreciate some of he's never had a chance to learn the lessons you've learned. Jonathan Adelstein was one of the best commissioners on the FCC, went on to run the Rural Utilities Service at the Department of Agriculture, giving out over $1 billion for building networks.
Wow. Wow.
Well, these are the people who make a lot of these decisions, and I'm lucky. I talk pretty good, and I actually know enough that I'm interesting to people. So I get to talk to some key people, and I was talking to him about a month ago, and he was talking about what Washington was expecting. So I was talking about, well, the context was what the cable guys could do to come into this infrastructure program. And it turns out that the technology in cable is now ready to give you upstream as fast as you need. In fact, as fast as you want. 100 megabits is going to be easy next year in cable. It's working in the field already. They're getting the last kinks out of it, and Comcast is ready to spend billions on it. We know it works because it's, as I say, already out in the field. We know it's not perfect yet, which is what you expect on any new technology. And Jonathan said, well, are they going to be ready to set up the projects for this December? And I said, what? And he said, that's what they're thinking in the infrastructure plan, that they're going to start getting the projects in this December because they want to start them next year. If somebody's coming, like, let's say Jonathan, who has never had hands-on experience, but he's been in the field in 10 years and he's smart, dedicated, progressive, a good guy.
Mhm.
Do you think he's ready in 3 months to start
If he,
figuring out how to build?
if he's CTCing, then we good. You know, because he sounds like a kind of guy that's going to CTC. That means cut the check. If he's cutting the check, he's good, because we would automatically know what needs. Somebody like us would automatically know what needs to happen next. So yeah, it's all about whether or not he's the guy that cuts the check.
And who he cuts it for.
That's what he sounds like. Yeah, who he cuts it for.
And who cuts it for.
So if he if he cutting the check and he's somebody like us, the shit's gonna be done. Yes.
Which is what I tried to explain to him and to Chris Lewis, who is a very good guy at Free Press. Excellent guy working on big issues in politics. They need to find places where there are people like you, and bring in people like you who have the experience and the knowledge. Because frankly, the folks who didn't have the experience and the knowledge, didn't have the organization, they were disasters building community broadband. Two of the biggest projects, Burlington, Vermont, the city decided to do, a city of 40,000 people. And Utopia, which was a cooperative of 6 cities out in Utah, the Utah, whatever the Utopia stood for. And we were all very excited when they started. 3 years later, they were bankrupt because their costs came in so high. Burlington, Vermont is like a suburb, and I think it even had overhead wires. It should have been the kind of place that, well, if somebody like Verizon came in, they could have wired it for less than $1,000 a home with fiber. They spent $4,000 a home.
Whoa.
And the same number came out of Utopia. And at $4,000 a home, the numbers didn't add up. And literally, both of the operations went seriously bankrupt in a few years. That's the experience I've been watching from people who don't have the knowledge and haven't learned the lessons that you guys have. And that's what I'm afraid. In fact, that's what I'm absolutely sure is going to happen to most of the projects that are out there. So there's a lot of places where you can find skilled people. We happen to know a few people who are working here in Harlem in the South Bronx, who, if they give you the money, could do a good job. You prove that. Another set of places where you can do it is there are a lot of rural electric co-ops who have been running for, well, since the 1930s and the 1950s, electric systems that are 3 times as big as a phone network would have to be, like in Huntsville, Alabama. Those guys know how to build networks, and they know what's what. And you give them the money, and they could come through. But this notion that we're going to get new people spontaneously in 3 months coming out of the communities with skills, yes, maybe 1 in 10 are going to succeed. But 9 out of 10 who don't have the experience and don't have the skills, they're going to be a disaster. And they're talking about throwing so much money. They're talking about $90 billion. That would require hundreds, thousands of small community groups, which don't exist right now. And most of it is going to fail if they go ahead and do that. And I think you guys know that even better than I do, because you know how hard it is. So I've been trying to tell the folks in Washington, no, you can't just throw money at it and expect in 4 months you're going to get skills. That you've got to plan it 2 years, 3 years to build up the skills, to go and put the money where people know how to use it. And in other places, go very slowly and make sure you build up skills. And did they not want to hear it, because for the same 25 years we've been doing this, have been seeing how badly the United States has been doing this, and they think anything would be better. And I wish it were that easy. Stu, am I wrong?
No, yeah, I think absolutely. You know, we were here for the BTOP experience, the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program under President Obama, and we were jumping up and down for the $3 billion that he put out there twice, 2 different cycles. And the money went to all the usual suspects. No new companies, to Doug's point. They did not want to fund anyone that would compete with the guys that already had the market positions. And so the money all went to the usual suspects. And I suspect we're gonna see that again. But Dave, I think, are you watching the clock? I think we're about out of time here. I don't know if you want any final comments from Mr. Dougie before we sign off.
Doug, wrap up for us. Can it be done?
Well, okay.
Communities build this
Yes,
stuff?
you know, yes, it can be done if they put the money in the right hands and think out of the box. One other thing, when you were mentioning about the cable company and they're going to have 100 megs up, it made me think of the 3 hubs that we already have right now, and all 3 of them are doing 2 gigs up and 2 gigs down, and that's what we use to feed out to at the 3 developments where we are servicing now. I just want to throw that out there when you mentioned the thing, mentioned the pricing, mentioned the speed thing. So there's a lot of speed there, and you know we've been working with Verizon, so we know who's got the money and the resources and how you can make something like this work. And you would probably need somebody of our skill who have worked at the multiple city level of doing these kinds of things, and who understands how to take people who don't know anything and put them into the machine, which is what we did, because we in Queens and in Philadelphia, we started those particular things from scratch. So we those are not things that we're unfamiliar with, so they can be done, and we're sure there are other people who are like that. But I wanted to just say this to you, Dave, because of the way you helped us. We're not sure, but we think that you know, we apply for all these government programs, whatever the city's doing and all this other stuff. But we did apply to the federal FCC to be a service provider in one of their broadband programs. So we don't know if they're going to pick us or not, but you know, we did that in conjunction with our others. I'm just throwing that out there because they might pick us, and we want to be able to say that we told you about it.
Well, if you want to talk to the people at the FCC, let me tell you something that's no secret in Washington, but not everybody knows, and that's part of the problem. Jessica Rosenworcel is running the FCC this year. I've known her as long as I've known you guys. She's very dedicated, very smart, has been in this in 20 years, but is a Washington person and doesn't necessarily know what it's like out in the field. You can reach Jessica Rosenworcel by sending an email to jessica.rosenworcel@fcc.gov, or anybody else at the FCC, because they all have the same pattern of email, first name dot last name, and they all read their email. Doesn't necessarily mean everybody's the head of the FCC is going to answer you right away, but she's going to read it if you go to her. So people like that are acceptable. They want to learn, they want to hear, and there's so much that I learned from people like you, and from the technicians at Verizon and AT&T, and from the professors at NYU who invented some of this stuff, that the people in Washington have to hear. And let's do what we can to make it so. And I think we're out of time. Stu, you want to sign us off?
Okay, well, first I want to thank Mr. Doug Frazier, co-executive producer of the program, for coming on and sharing his experience with us. And thank you, Dave, for doing such an excellent job of hosting. This has been Community and Technology from 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Tune in next week, 5 p.m. Just might learn something. Thanks.